Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Educate, enlighten, entertain. On today's episode of Lest We Forget Historical with your host Lillian Cauldwell, we are going to speak about the nuclear weapons that Vladimir Putin may or may not, depending on his attitude and behavior at the time, of using nuclear weapons and outer space. This was brought to my attention by my station manager, Jeannie White, who said she heard a news story about Putin putting nuclear weapons in space to shoot down any missiles from the U.S. or their NATO allies. Unfortunately for the rest of us, it takes down as well the commercial use of everything that we depend on. The internet, which means you cannot use it. It will be utterly defunct. No laptops, no cell phones, no infrastructure that the United States and most Western countries depend on. So I went and did a little research, and I found a very interesting article on CNN Politics, and it was released around the time that announcement about Putin putting space weapons into space on February 15th. So according to CNN, Putin, i.e. Russia, is trying to develop a new nuclear space weapon that would destroy satellites by creating a massive energy wave when detonated. Think of the massive sonic wave in the movie The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, when Sauron's empire fell, and you saw this gigantic wave of noise sweeping back over Aragorn and his troops. That's what they're talking about, which will happen in space. And because of that, it will potentially cripple a large swath of the commercial and government satellites that we have begun to depend on. As I repeat, cell phones, pay bills, and surf the internet. According to 3 sources that have been identified as intelligence, U.S. intelligence. These same sources gave CNN a more detailed understanding of what Russia / Putin is working on and the threat it could pose, more than what the U.S. government has already disclosed or is willing to share, depending which way you want to look at it. Republican Rep. Mike Turner of Ohio, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, went back to Washington that Wednesday, where he issued a statement saying his panel had, quote, had information concerning a serious national security threat. By Friday of that same week, President Joe Biden had publicly confirmed that Turner was referring to a new Russian nuclear anti-satellite capability. But the officials here have refused to discuss it, citing that it's highly classified. Well, it's not highly classified as Putin is telling the world, yes, is developing a nuclear weapon to put into space. This kind of new weapon, known generally by military space experts here in the States as their nuclear EMP, it would create a pulse of electromagnetic energy and a flood of highly charged particles that will tear through space to disrupt other satellites winging around Earth. And we have a lot of satellites winging around Earth. However, Biden emphasized on that Friday that there is, quote, no nuclear threat to the people of America or anywhere else in the world with what Russia is doing at the moment. Are you comforted by hearing Mr. President say that to you? Really? Is this the beginning of the Cold War that I was raised in during the 50s and early 60s? I've been told that people have bought bomb shelters in New Zealand because that's the safest place for them to hide out. But my question is, what happens if there's a nuclear winter and their food resources, not to mention water, is all gone? They die and starve in those bunkers? Just asking. The Defense Department and the intelligence community have tracked Russia's efforts to develop a broad range of anti-satellite weapons, including an EMP, for years. And then there's also the stream of intelligence reporting in recent months related specifically to Russia's efforts to develop a nuclear power anti-satellite capability. And that's according to one defense official. However, it seems that Russia has made some progress in their nuclear program. And it goes back a lot of months, if not a few years, the National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said on Thursday. But only in recent weeks now has the intelligence community been able to assess with a higher sense of confidence exactly how Russia continues to pursue it. Oh, why don't they just share it with Korea? I know they're aching to do that too. It's not a new concept, according to Mr. Kirby. And as a concept, dates back to the late Cold War. But another U.S. official said the big fear would any eventual EMP device in orbit, it might render large portions of particular orbits unstable by creating a mantle of disabled satellites that would then prove dangerous to any one new satellites we might try to put up to replace or repair the existing satellites. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Defense Department, and the National Security Council all declined to comment. CNN then says it's not immediately clear whether the device, as designed, could impact GPS and nuclear command and control satellites, which operate in a higher orbit than the vast constellation of commercial and government satellites whizzing through low Earth orbit. These larger satellites are designed to be impregnable to a nuclear blast. But a former top space official at the Pentagon then told CNN they could be vulnerable depending on how close they were to the EMP, how old they are, and how big the blast. Well, that's real comforting, isn't it? Now, the experts weigh in, let's not forget them, say that this kind of weapon could have the potential to wipe out mega constellations of small satellites, like SpaceX Starlink, which has been successfully used by Ukraine in its ongoing war with Russia. This would almost certainly be a last-ditch weapon. Well, that's why the atomic bomb was created. Folks, a last-ditch effort. They knew that Hitler was working on his own version of the atomic bomb. He certainly had the brain power with his scientists. And so the United States had to upstage him. And that's why the Manhattan Project was created, to create the atomic bomb and use it in the field of war before Hitler had an opportunity to do it. Another side note was that Hitler wanted to put a very large mirror satellite up in space with the idea of using it as a reflection and sending death rays into the battlefield to destroy the weapons of the Allies. So nothing surprises me. nothing at all. It also remains unclear, CNN goes on to say, how well developed the technology is. Russia has had a number of public debacles with their nuclear technology. In 2019, 7 Russians were killed in a nuclear accident that occurred while Moscow was trying to recover a nuclear-powered cruise missile that had crashed into the White Sea during a failed test. In a recent intelligence assessment on Russian progress did alarm some lawmakers on Capitol Hill that Turner issued an invitation to all members of the House to be read in on this matter of Putin's new secret space weapon. He also offered the vague public statement that forced the issue into the public eye. In addition, several sources familiar with the matter said that the exposure of the intelligence was extremely damaging because the source was incredibly sensitive. According to those sources, the intelligence community is now scrambling to figure out how to preserve its access. The Biden administration's officials contend that if Russia were to field a nuclear EMP, it would be the first ever violation of the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. For those who are not familiar, we will discuss that in our next episode, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which bans stationing weapons of mass destruction in outer space. It would be a violation of the Outer Space Treaty to which more than 130 countries have signed up to, including Russia, Kirby said Thursday, without providing additional details. Russia has withdrawn from several arms control treaties in recent years, leaving the post-Cold War arms control architecture all but gutted. And then Putin has the temerity to say that if the West sends troops to Ukraine, it could lead to nuclear war. Our former president also said he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want to any NATO country that doesn't pay enough. So, what's the person to think? How do you protect yourself? Well, folks, most of our politicians are people we voted into office, so you may want to think about that. Call to action: start writing to your senators and congressmen and demand to know what is going on. You put them into office based on their promises. Well, have they fulfilled any of your promises? What about the one to defend and protect their country at all costs, including their life? So find out what they're doing. And if you don't like what they're doing, write them a letter, send them text, send them an email. Get involved in your political system. This stuff is going to continue going on unless you, yes, you, personally do something about it. Just being part of the herd no longer works. The herd mentality is for safety in numbers. Trust me, when they drop the atom bomb, it doesn't care whether you're a single lone person or a whole group. Just ask the people in Japan on those 2 cities that were bombed with the atomic bomb by the United States and ask them about it. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren are still having the effects of the nuclear virus in their system and has done great damage to them. It's really easy for Putin or any high-stakes official to say, let's have a nuclear war. Sure, they're protected, but you're not. They can come out in 100 years' time and be okay, but you don't have that opportunity. They can run away from war. Of course, they say they're saving themselves so they can be in power again. But the point of the story is, folks, that you're the ones who are going to run the risk of being bombed out. I want to thank you all very much for listening and joining us for this episode. I also want to understand that we are having some technical difficulties at the moment, and that's why I was cut off. I also want to remind you that Gold Nuggets, digital podcasting, digital strategies for digital podcasting, has been reissued. It's written by Vicky Esther Chang and Lillian Cauldwell, and it has a workbook now that accompanies it. Please go over to Amazon and order it. It's more than just or beyond speaking into a microphone. Also, PWTR, Passionate World Radio Network, is looking for passionate hosts to come and join our team. Text us or go over to passionateworldtalkradio.com, and on the comment form, please leave your name, your email address, your phone number, good time to call you, and let us know that you're interested in becoming a host. You will need to send 1 or 2 examples to us of previous podcasts or maybe a speaking engagement, something that can give us an idea how well you project and whether you really know how to do a podcast. If you don't, that's fine. We train people to become podcasters. Not a problem. Text 484-364-1032 or email us pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com. And one other thing before you go. Think about what you want for your grandchildren or their children. And if you don't want your future world for them to look like the future world you keep on seeing on the newer science fiction stories that are being made into movies, I suggest you start becoming involved or at least aware politically of what your rights are as a citizen and what you can do to make a change. You don't have to just stay with your point of view here in the States. You can reach out overseas and do something about that and talk to them and find out how they feel about what's going on. Because I'm pretty sure that the citizens of the other countries feel just like you. After all the United States is descended from all the Western nations overseas, unless they are Native Americans or Native Canadians. Something to think about. So I want to thank you all very much for joining us. The website is passionateworldtalkradio.com, and you can listen and view the video there. YouTube.com/PWR Network _PW Talk Radio. Facebook.com/Passionate World Talk Radio. And you can hear us on at least 20 different streaming directories, in addition to LinkedIn, Spreaker, Twitter, Instagram. So thank you all very much for listening. And remember, the only people who can make changes to what's going on here at home or even in space is you, the citizens of any country. So contact your political leaders and tell them you're not happy. I know lots of you can confront because you do it on behalf of your children all the time. So if nothing else, think about your children and how you didn't bring them into the world to be killed by the time they were 20 years old. Thank you very much for listening and have a great day.